They're absolutely the worst kids in the history of the world.
They lied
and stole
And smoked cigars.
even the girls. It's hot dirty.
They cursed their teachers.
And took the name of the Lord in vain.
And set fire to Fred Shoemaker's old broken down tool house.
They were just so all around awful. You could hardly believe they were real.
There were
Ralph.
Emma Jean.
Leroy, Claude,
Ollie.
and Gladys!
the youngest.
6 skinny, stringy-haired kids, all alike except for being different sizes and having different black and blue marks, but they had blocked each other.
They lived over a garage at the bottom of Sproul Hill. Nobody used the garage anymore except the Herdmans used to bang the door up and down because they were trying to squash each other.
That was their idea of a game.
Where other people had grass in the front yards, the Herdmans had
Rocks. And where other people have hibiscus trees, the Herdmans had
Poison ivy.
There was also a sign in the yard that said,
Beware of the cat.
The new kids always laughed about that until they saw a cat.
It was the meanest looking animal I ever saw.
It had one short leg and a broken tail, and it was missing an eye.
And the mailman wouldn't deliver anything to the Herdmans because of it.
the Herdmans moved from gray to gray through the Woodrow Wilson School, like the South American fish that strip your bones clean in 3 minutes flat, which was just about what they did to one teacher after another.
But they never got them back in the grave.
When it came time for Leroy to pass to the 2nd grade, he didn't even know his ABCs.
Or his numbers.
Or his colors.
Or his shapes.
Or his 3 bears.
Or how to get along with anybody.
But Miss Brandon passed him anyway. For one thing, she knew she'd have Ollie Herdman the next year. That was the thing about the Herdmans. There was always another one coming along, and no teacher was crazy enough to let herself in for 2 of them at once.
My son Charlie was always in the same grade with Emma Jean Herdman, and what I told him was to stay out of her way. As far as I was concerned, Emma Jean was just like the rest of them. She didn't learn anything either.
Except dirty
The
words.
secrets about everyone.
Twice a year, all the kids had to go to the health room to get weighed and measured. Imogen always managed to find out exactly what everybody weighed. Your weight was supposed to be a big secret, like what you got on your report card. Not even the fat kids could find out what they weighed. But Imogen always knew.
Don't let Albert Godfrey on the swing, he'll bust it.
She'd yell at recess.
Albert Godfrey weighs 143 pounds. Last time he weighed 137.
So right away, everybody knew 2 things about Albert. They knew exactly how fat he was, and they knew he was getting fatter all the time.
You have to go to fat camp this summer. Miss Hemphill wrote it down on your paper.
Fat camp is a place where they feed you lettuce and grapefruit and cottage cheese and eggs for a month. And you either give up and cheat, or give up and get skinny.
And what?
Albert said.
I'm going to Disneyland with all the friends.
That's what you think.
Albert had to believe her. She was always right about those things. So all year he had fat camp to look forward to instead of
Disneyland?
It was no good trying to keep secrets on the Herdmans. Everybody already knew all the awful things they did. You couldn't even tease them about their parents or holler.
Your father's in jail.
We don't care.
Actually, they didn't know what their father was or where he was. When Gladys was just only 2 years old, he climbed on a railroad train and disappeared.
Nobody blamed them.
So the Herdmans were pretty much looked after themselves. They were like most other big families.
The big ones,
Not
not
the
the
little
little
ones.
ones. Everything they knew.
And the proof of that was the meanest Herman of all.
The youngest. We figured they were headed straight for hell.
By the way, to state penitentiary.
Until they got themselves mixed up with the church and Mother and the
Christmas pageant.
Mother didn't expect to have anything to do with the Christmas pageant except to make Charlie be in it
And he did not want to.
and to make Father go, and he didn't want to.
Every year he said the same thing.
I've seen the Christmas pageant.
And Mother would tell him.
You haven't seen this year's Christmas pageant? Charlie is going to be a shepherd this year.
Charlie was a shepherd last year. No. You go on and go. I'm going to put on my bathrobe and sit by the fire and relax. There's never anything different about the Christmas pageant.
There's something different this year.
What?
Charlie is wearing your bathrobe.
So Father went.
To see his bathrobe, he said.
Actually, he went every year, but it was always a struggle.
Mother said that was her contribution to the Christmas pageant, getting Father to go to it.
But when she got stuck with the whole thing, when Mrs. Armstrong fell and broke her leg,
Now, The Christmas pageant isn't what you call four-star entertainment. Miss Armstrong breaking her leg was just about the only unexpected thing that ever happened to her. The plot is standard.
The end.
The stable.
The shepherds.
The star.
The angel.
And so are the costumes, and so is the casting.
Primary kids are the angels.
Intermediate kids are the shepherds.
Big boys are wise men.
Elmer Hopkins, the minister's son, he's been Joseph for as long as I can remember.
And Alice Windlekin is married because she's
So smart.
So neat.
And clean.
And most of all,
So holy looking. Everyone else is a part of the angel choir lined up according to height because nobody could sing parts.
no one can sing. They're strictly a no-talent outfit.
Except for a girl named Alberta Bottles, who whistles. Last year, Alberta whistled what chalices for a change of pace, but nobody liked it, especially Mrs. Bottles. She put too much into it and passed out cold on the manger in the middle of the third verse.
Aside from that, though, it's always just the Christmas story. Year after year, with people shuffling around in bathrobes and bed sheets and sharp wings. Well, here's your big chance.
Father said once Mother got put in charge of it.
Why don't you cancel the pageant and show movies?
Never mind. I guess you think you're pretty funny. The Christmas pageant is a tradition, and I don't plan to do anything different this year.
Of course, nobody even thought about the Herdmans in connection with the Christmas pageant. Most of the kids spent all week at school being pounded and poked around by the Herdmans, and they look forward to Sunday as being a real day of rest.
In the end, it was Charlie's fault that the Herdmans showed up at church. For 3 days in a row, Leroy Herman stole the dessert from Charlie's lunchbox, and finally, Charlie gave up trying to do anything about it.
Oh, go on and take it. I don't care. I get all the dessert I want in Sunday school.
Leroy wanted to know more about that.
what kind of dessert?
Chocolate cake and candy bars and ice cream. We get refreshments all the time. All we want.
You're a liar.
Leroy was right. They got jelly beans at Easter and punch and cookies at Vacation Bible School, but that was it.
We get donuts and popcorn balls too.
Oh yeah? Who gives it to you?
The minister.
He didn't know what else to say.
Of course, that was the wrong thing to say if you wanted the Herdmans to stay away. And sure enough, the very next Sunday, there they were slouching into Sunday school, eyes peeled for the refreshments.
Where do you get the cake?
Ralph asked the Sunday school superintendent, and Mr. Grady said,
Well, son, I don't know about any cake. But they're collecting food packages out in the kitchen.
what he meant was the canned stuff we brought in every year at Thanksgiving for the orphan's home.
It was just our bad luck that the Herdmans picked that Sunday to come because when they saw all of the
Jam for spaghetti.
And beans and grapes.
And peanut butter.
they figured there might be some truth to what Charlie said about the refreshments.
So they stayed. They didn't sing any hymns or say any prayers, but they did make a little money.
Because I saw Imogen steal a handful of coins out of the collection basket when I passed her.
Then, at the end of the morning, Mr. Grady came to every class and made an announcement.
We'll be starting rehearsal soon for our Christmas pageant. But this year, we're going to do the service and we're going to gather in the back of the church to decide who is going to get the main roles. But of course, we want every boy and girl to take part in the pageant. So be sure to tell your parents that you'll be staying a little later this Sunday.
Mr. Grady made the same speech every year, so he didn't get any wild applause. Besides, as I said, everyone already knew what part they were going to play anyways. All of a sudden, Imogen Herman dug Alice in the ribs with her elbow.
Oh, she has the sharpest elbows of anybody I ever knew.
What's a pageant?
It's a play.
She said, and for the first time that day, except when she saw the collection basket, Emma Jean looked interested.
What's a play about?
It's about Jesus.
Everything here is.
With that remark, I figured Emma Jean didn't care much about Christmas pageant. But I was wrong.
Good old Mrs. Armstrong called up Mother from the hospital bed and said,
Here's what I do. I get them all together and I tell them about the rehearsals and that they must be on time and pay attention. And then I tell them about the main roles, that they're Mary and Joseph and the wise men and the angel of the Lord. And then I always remind them that there are no small parts Only small actors.
Do they even understand what that means?
Oh, yes.
Later, Mother asked me if I did know what that meant about small parts and small actors, but I didn't really know. None of us did.
This is just something Mrs. Armstrong always said.
I think it means that the short kids have to stand in the front of the angel choir, otherwise nobody can see them.
I thought so. It doesn't mean that at all. It really means that every single person in the pageant is just as important as every other person. Like the baby, smallest angel is just as important as Mary.
Mrs. Armstrong called Mother 2 more times that week, and by Sunday,
Mother was already sick of the whole thing.
after church, everyone filed into the back 7 pews, and Mother started her speech.
First, I'm going to tell you about our rehearsals. We'll have our rehearsals on Wednesdays at 6:30. We're only going to have 5 rehearsals, so you must try to be present at every single one.
What if we get sick?
Asked the little kid in the front pew.
You
Mother told
won't
him,
get sick. Now, you little children in the primary class, you will be our angels. You'll like that, won't you?
well, they had to say yes. What else could they say?
The older boys and girls will be shepherds and guest meeting and members of the choir.
Mother was really zipping along, and I couldn't help but think about how mad Mrs. Armstrong would be about all the things she was leaving out.
And we need Mary and Joseph, the 3 wise men, and the angel of the Lord. Those aren't hard parts, but they're very important parts. So the people who play those must absolutely be at every rehearsal.
What if they get sick?
It was the same little kid, and made you wonder what kind of little kid he was to always be so concerned about sickness.
They won't get sick either. Now, we all know what kind of person Mary was. She was quiet and gentle and kind. And the person who plays Mary should try to be that kind of person. I know that many of you would like to be Mary in our pageant, but of course, we can only have one Mary. So, I'll ask for volunteers, and then we'll all decide together which little girl should get the part.
That was pretty safe to say, since the only person who ever raised her hand was
Alice Pendleton.
But Alice just sat there chewing on a piece of her hair and looking down at the floor. And the only person who raised her hand this time was
Imogene Herman?
Did you have a question, Imogene?
No, I want to be Mary, and Ralph wants to be Joseph.
Mother just stared at them. It was like a detective movie when a nice little old gray-haired lady sticks a gun in a bank window and says,
Give me all your money!
and you can't believe it. Mother couldn't believe this.
Well, we want to be sure that everybody has a chance. Does anybody want to volunteer to be Joseph? No one did. No one ever did. Especially not Elmer Hopkins. But he couldn't do anything about it because he was a minister's son. 1 year, he didn't volunteer to be Joseph, and neither did anyone else. And afterwards, I heard Reverend Hopkins talking to Elmer out in the hall.
You are born to be Joseph, and that is that.
But Dad, I don't want to be Joseph. I'm too big. I feel dumb up there with all those little kids. They give me such a pain in the neck.
I can understand that. I can even sympathize. But until somebody else turns out to be Joseph, you are stuck with it.
Nobody's ever going to volunteer. I even offered Grady Baker $5 to play Joseph, and he wouldn't take it. I'm going to have to be Joseph for the rest of my life.
Oh, cheer up. Somebody will turn up.
I bet they didn't think that somebody would be Ralph Herdman.
Oh, all right. Ralph will be our Joseph. Now, does anyone want to volunteer to be Mary? Alice? Roberta? Janet? Oh, come on, Alice. Don't you want to volunteer to be Mary?
No, I don't want to.
Nobody volunteered to be the wise men either, except
Leroy!
God, and Ollie Herdman.
so there was Mother stuck with a pageant full of
Herdmans.
In the main roles.
There was 1 herdman left over and 1 main role left over. And you didn't have to be very smart to figure out that Gladys was going to be the angel of the Lord.
What I gotta do? The angel of the Lord is the one who brings the good news to the shepherds.
Right away, all the shepherds began to wiggle around in their seats, figuring that any good news Gladys brought them would come with a smack in the teeth.
And then some. That angel isn't gonna hit anybody, and we're not gonna have any shepherds quitting or getting sick.
She had it before the little kid in the front pew could ask. While everyone was leaving, Mother grabbed Alice Windleton by the arm and said,
Alice, why in the world didn't you
But I heard Imogene telling Alice out in the hall all the things that would happen to her if she even dared to volunteer.
All the ordinary, everyday herdman things like
Clunking you on the head and drawing pictures all over your homework papers.
And putting worms in your coat pocket. Mom!
So, that was why Alice kept her mouth shut about being married. One mother told the Ladies' Aid Society that it was sacrilegious to have Imogene Herdman be married. Someone we never heard of called a mother on the telephone and said her name was
Hazen Beck. And is it true that Imogene is going to be playing Mary, the mother of Jesus, in a church play?
Yes, Imogene is going to be married in our Christmas pageant.
And the rest of them too?
Yes, Ralph is going to be Joseph, and the others are the wise men and the angel of the Lord.
You must be crazy. I live next door to that outfit up on Sprout Hill where they're yelling and their insane cat and their garage door going up and down all day long. And let me tell you something, you're in for a rowdy time.
Some people said it wasn't fair for the whole family that didn't go to our church to barge in and take over the pageant. Mother just said she'd rather be in the hospital with Mrs. Armstrong. But rehearsal started the next Wednesday with, after all, nobody wanted to take over that pageant with or without the Herdmans. The first pageant rehearsal was usually about as much fun as a 3-hour ride on a school bus, and just as noisy and crowded. This rehearsal, though, was a little different. Everybody shut up and settled down right away for fear of missing something awful that the Herdmans might do. Mother started to separate everybody into the angels and the shepherds and the guests at the end, but right away she ran into trouble. Leroy Herdman wanted to know,
Who are the shepherds? Where do they come from?
Gladys asked, what's an inn? What's an inn? It's like a motel where people go and spend the night.
Who? Jesus?
Oh, honestly, Jesus wasn't even born yet. Mary and Joseph went there.
Why?
What happened first? Begin at the beginning.
And that terrified me because we had to start in the beginning. That would mean in Genesis where it says in the beginning. And if we had to start in Genesis, we'd never get through.
that was the thing. The Herdmans didn't know anything about the Christmas story.
Alice told me.
Oh, they've never been to church in their whole life until you told them they got refreshments. And all you ever hear about Christmas in school is how to make ornaments out of aluminum foil. So what else would they know about Christmas?
They just didn't know. So, Mother said she had better begin by reading the Christmas story from the Bible.
This is a pain in the neck for all of us because we knew the whole thing backward and forward. Never had to be told anything except for where we're supposed to stand and who we're supposed to be.
Joseph and Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child.
You ain't pregnant?
Well, that stirred things up. All the big kids began to giggle and all the little kids wanted to know what was so funny. And Mother had a hammer on the floor with her shoe.
That's enough, Ralph.
Mother went on with the story.
I don't think it's very nice to talk about Mary being pregnant.
But she was, I pointed out. In a way, though, I agreed with her. It sounded too ordinary. Anybody could be pregnant. Great with child sounded much better for Mary.
I'm not supposed to talk about people being pregnant. I better tell my mother.
Tell her what?
That your mother's talking about things like that in church. My mother might not want me to be here.
I was pretty sure she would do it. I knew, too, that when she did it, she would make it sound worse than it was, and Mrs. Windleton would get madder than she already was.
Mrs. Wendlekin didn't even want cats to have kittens or birds to lay eggs. And she sure wouldn't let Alice play with anyone who had 2 rabbits.
When Mother read there about there being no room at the inn, Imogene's jaw dropped and she sat up in her seat.
Not even for Jesus?
Well, now, after all, nobody knew the baby was going to turn out to be Jesus.
You said marry me. Why didn't you tell him?
I would have told him. Boy, would I have told him. What was the matter with Joseph that he didn't tell him? We're being pregnant and everything.
What was that they put the baby in? That manger. What was that, like a bed? Why do they have a bed in a barn?
That's just the point. They didn't have a bed in a barn, so they had to use whatever there was. What would you do if you had a new baby and no place to put the baby in?
I put Gladys in the dresser drawer.
Well, there you are. You didn't have a bed for Gladys, so you had to use something else.
Oh, we had a bed, but Ollie was still in it, and he would get out. He liked Gladys very much.
Anyway, Mary and Joseph used a manger. A manger is a large wooden feeding trough for animals.
Leroy wanted to know about the wadded up clothes.
Hey, What were those wadded-up clothes you talked about?
The what?
The wadded-up clothes, you read it. She said you wrapped them in wadded-up clothes.
Oh, swaddling clothes. Long ago, people used to wrap their babies very tightly in big pieces of material so they couldn't move around. It made the babies feel cozy and comfortable.
You mean they tied him up and put him in a feed box? Where was the social worker?
And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and shazam! What?
Mother had never watched Captain Marvel on TV or read the Amazing Comics.
Out of the dark night, with horrible vengeance, the mighty Marvel. I don't know what you're talking about, Gladys. This is the angel of the Lord, who comes to the shepherds in the fields.
Out of nowhere, right? Out of the black night, right?
Well, in a way.
So Gladys sat back down looking very satisfied, as if this is at least one part of the Christmas story that made sense to her.
Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying,
Well, it's about time. Now maybe they'll tell that innkeeper where to get off and get that baby out of the barn.
They saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him, and presented unto him 3 gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh,
What's that stuff?
precious oils, and fragrant resins.
Oil. Okay, my chief king hands out oil for a present.
Then we came to King Herdman, King Herod, and the Herdmans had never heard of him either. He was really interesting to them. I figured they just liked him. He was so mean he could have been one of their ancestors. Herod Herdman. But I was wrong.
Who's gonna play Herod in the play?
I'm Herod. Not Joseph.
Boys, we don't show Herod in our pageant.
And they all got mad. They wanted someone to be Herod so they could beat up on him.
I couldn't understand the Herdmans. You would have thought the Christmas story came straight out of the FBI files. They got so involved in it, they wanted,
A bloody end to Herod.
worried about,
You're having your baby in a barn.
and called the wise men.
A bunch of dirty spies.
And they left the first rehearsal arguing about whether Joseph should have set fire to the inn or just chased the innkeeper into the next country.
And the whole father wanted to hear all about it.
Well, just suppose you had never heard of the Christmas story before and didn't know anything about it. And then somebody told it to you. What would you think?
Well, I guess I would think it was pretty disgraceful that they couldn't find room for a pregnant woman except in a stable.
Exactly. It was pretty disgraceful. And I never thought much about it. You hear all about the nice warm stable with the animals breathing and the sweet smelling hay. But that doesn't change the fact that they put Mary in a barn. Now, let me tell you.
Mother told father everything, and when she was through, she said,
It's clear to me that deep down inside, those children have some good instincts after all.
The next rehearsal, Mother started again to separate everyone into angels and shepherds and guests at the end. But again, she didn't get very far. The Herdmans wanted to rewrite the whole pageant.
And hang Herod for a finish.
They couldn't stand that he died in bed of old age.
Since none of the Herdmans had ever gone to church or Sunday school or read the Bible or anything, we didn't know how things were supposed to be.
Imogene, for instance, she didn't know that Mary wasn't supposed to be like Mrs. Santorini at the pizza parlor. Mrs. Santorini is a big, huge lady with a skinny little husband and 9 children. She yells and hollers and hugs her kids. That's how Imogene's Mary was, loud and bossy.
Get away from the baby!
She'd yell at Ralph, who was Joseph,
Shut up, baby face.
and she made the wise men keep their distance.
Watch it, Buster.
The wise men want to honor the Christ child. They don't want to harm him.
I'll bet if King Herod got his hands on that baby, he'd murder
He
him.
would not. I don't think it's very nice to talk about the baby Jesus being murdered.
That was one more thing to tell her mother about the Herdmans. I think she was hoping they would commit one big, simple thing, and her mother would say, well, that's it, and get on the phone and have them all tossed out. Finally, it came to the last rehearsal.
Now, this is going to be a dress rehearsal.
Half the angel choir had forgotten their robes, and Hobie Carmichael said he didn't have any kind of costume.
Hey, just wear your father's bathrobes. That's what I do.
My dad doesn't have a bathrobe.
What does he walk around the house in?
Well, it's underwear.
The main point of the dress rehearsal isn't the costumes. The main point is to go straight through without stopping, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. I'm gonna sit in the back of the room and be the audience.
I got the baby here. Touch him. Name him Jesus.
Now, Emma Jean, you know you're not supposed to say anything.
I think I ought to tell him what the baby's name is.
No, besides, you remember it wasn't Mary who named the baby.
I told you I named him.
Joseph didn't name the baby either. God sent an angel to tell Mary what his name should be.
Why didn't they just let Mary name her own baby? What did the angel do? Just walk up and say, name of Jesus.
Yes.
I know what the angel said. He said his name shall be Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. I would have named him Bill.
Yeah.
Alice Wendelkin sucked in her breath, and I could hear her scratching down on her pad of paper that Imogene would have named the baby Bill instead of Jesus.
What kind of angel is that?
Is that Gladys?
No. Gladys is an angel who comes to the shepherds with the news.
Yeah, unto you a child is born.
Unto me, not them. Me, I'm the one who had the baby.
No. That just means that Jesus belongs to everybody. Unto all of us a child is born. Now, let's start again.
At last it was the night of the pageant, and everybody came just to see what the herdmans would do, I think.
We didn't have any supper that night. His mother forgot to fix it.
We've never once gone through the whole thing. I don't know what's going to happen. It may be the first Christmas pageant in history where Joseph and the wise men get into a fight, and Mary runs away with the baby.
But at 7:30, everything settled down and the pageant began.
We sang 2 verses of O Little Town of Bethlehem, and then we were supposed to hum a few more verses of O Little Town of Bethlehem while Mary and Joseph came in through a side door. Only they didn't come in right away,
So they hummed
And hummed.
and hummed,
which is very boring and also really hard.
and before long, it doesn't even sound like a song at all. More like an old refrigerator.
I knew this would happen. They didn't come at all. We won't have any Mary or Joseph. And now what are we supposed to do?
I guess they would have gone on humming till everyone turned blue. But they didn't have to. Ralph and Emma Jean were there all right, only for once they didn't come through the door pushing each other out of the way.
They came in looking like refugees, sent to wait in some strange, dark, ugly place with all of their boxes and sacks around them. It suddenly occurred to me that this was just the way it must have been for the real Holy Family, stuck away in a barn by people who didn't much care what happened to them.
They couldn't have been very neat and tidy either, but more like this Mary and Joseph. Emma Jean had the baby doll, but she wasn't carrying it the way she was supposed to, cradled in her arms. She had it slung over her shoulders, and before she put it in the manger, she thumped it twice on the back.
I don't think it's very nice to birth the baby Jesus.
I didn't know why not. He could have had colic, or been fussy, or hungry like any other baby. After all, that was the whole point of Jesus, that he didn't come down from the clouds like something out of Amazing Comics, but that he was born and lived a real person.
Next came Gladys from behind the angel choir, pushing people out of the way and stepping on everyone's feet. Since Gladys was the only one in the pageant that had anything to say, she made the most of it.
Hey, unto you a child is born.
All the shepherds trembled and were sore afraid.
Of Gladys mainly, but of the good anyway.
We got a little rest while the boys sang We Three Kings of Orient Are, and everyone in the audience shifted around to watch the wise men march up the aisle.
What have they got? I knew this would happen. I bet it's something awful. Like what? Like a burnt offering or a bomb? You know, the herdmans.
It was a ham. And right away, I knew where it came from. Mother was on the church charitable works committee, and they gave food baskets away at Christmas. And this was the herdman's food basket ham. It still had the ribbon around it saying Merry Christmas.
Leroy Herman dropped the ham in front of the manger. It looked funny to see a ham there instead of the fancy basalt jars we always use for myrrh and frankincense. And then they went and sat down, in the only space that was left.
It seemed to me that the Herdmans had improved the pageant a lot, just by doing what came naturally.
Like burping a baby, for instance.
Or thinking a ham would make a better present than a lot of perfumed oil.
Usually, by the time we got to Silent Night, which was always the last carol, Father was fed up with the whole thing and couldn't wait for it to be over.
But this time I didn't feel that way. I almost wanted the pageant to go on and on with the Herdmans in charge, just to see what else they would do that was different.
Maybe the wise men would tell Mary about their problems with Herod.
Or maybe Joseph would go with them and get rid of Herod once and for all.
Or Joseph and Mary might ask the wise men to take the Christ child with them, figuring no one would look there.
Everyone had been waiting all this time for the Herdmans to do something absolutely unexpected. And sure enough, that's what happened.
Imogen Herdman was crying.
In the candlelight, her face was all shiny with tears, and she didn't even bother to wipe them away. She just sat there, awful old Imogen in her crookedy veil, crying and crying and crying.
Well, it was the best Christmas pageant we ever had. For years, I had thought about the wonder of Christmas and the mystery of Jesus' birth, and never really understood it. But now, because of the Herdmans, it didn't seem so mysterious after all.
When Imogen had asked what the pageant was about, she was told that it was about Jesus. That was just a part of it. It was about a new baby and his mother and his father who were in a lot of trouble.
No money, no place to go, no doctor, nobody they knew, and then, arriving from the east, some rich friends.
But Imogen, I guess, didn't see it that way. Christmas just came over her all at once like chills and fever. So she was crying.
As far as I'm concerned, Mary is always going to look a lot like Imogen Herdman, sort of nervous and bewildered, but ready to clobber anybody that lays a hand on her baby.
And the wise men are always going to look like Leroy and his brothers bearing ham.
When we came out of church that night, it was cold and clear, with crunchy snow underfoot and bright, bright stars overhead.
And I thought about the angel of the Lord, Gladys, with her skinny legs and her dirty sneakers sticking out from under her robe, yelling at all of us everywhere.
Hey! Unto you a child is born.
And to all of you tonight, we say the same thing.
Hey!